From tribal villages to online groups, community has always been at the heart of what it means to be human. But in the digital age, are we truly connecting or just feeding the algorithm? This is episode 6 of 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, Navigating the Now. Today, we explore the growing tension between our online networks and the offline connections we deeply need to thrive. Welcome to the deep dive. We're diving into some really fascinating material you've shared with us today. We're looking at community, social networks, and, well, the challenge of human connection here in the 21st century. Our job is really to unpack all the stuff you sent over and pull out the key ideas.
Absolutely. And the sources, they paint a really interesting picture. They show how big tech companies, like Facebook, are seeing this decline in, let's say, traditional communities and trying to build technical fixes.
Technical fixes for social problems?
Exactly. But there's also this fundamental tension the sources highlight between online connections and the physical offline ones we seem to really need.
Okay, so let's start there, with the problem itself. The material seems to link some big sociopolitical events, like it mentions the 2016 U.S. election specifically. Links that tremor to a kind of disintegration of community.
Yeah, that's the argument presented. The research cited suggests that membership in, well, all kinds of groups, church groups, clubs, you name it, it's dropped quite a bit over the last few decades. Maybe as much as a quarter, apparently.
Wow, a quarter.
Yeah. So that leaves a lot of people searching for, purpose and support somewhere else.
And it makes you think, doesn't it? When you hear about communities declining, what does that actually mean for you personally in your day-to-day life? It's kind of the question hanging over all this material.
And it's right there that the sources shift focus towards Facebook. Especially after that 2016 election, it seems they kind of acknowledged maybe they were part of the issue. And their reaction was to look for a technical solution.
Right, the tech solution again. The sources really zoom in on Mark Zuckerberg's response, don't they? Mentioning his February 2017 manifesto and then that community summit speech in June, he really seemed to lean into this idea.
Oh, definitely. His stated goal was huge, basically to help rebuild communities using AI, he said, to suggest meaningful communities. That phrase comes up a lot.
Meaningful communities, yeah.
And the target, helping 1 billion people join them. He's quoted saying they wanted to change Facebook's whole mission to do this, which sounds, incredibly ambitious.
It really does. A tech giant aiming to fix the social fabric.
But, and this is a big but in the sources, there's the timing. Remember the Cambridge Analytica scandal?
Of course. Hard to forget.
Well, the source material points out that scandal all about data misuse for influencing elections. It broke just months after Zuckerberg made these big promises about community. The text argues it basically made a mockery of those goals and shattered public trust.
So this grand vision almost immediately runs into this massive crisis of trust. Ouch.
Exactly. But interestingly, the sources still say, okay, despite all that, it's worth looking at the vision Facebook put forward, even if the reality got very complicated very fast.
Okay, so what was at the core of that vision and maybe the critique of it?
Well, looking at the vision brings us back to something really fundamental the sources emphasize. Our biology. As of 2018, they say, humans are basically still Stone Age animals. We're hardwired for small groups. We need intimate communities to really flourish.
Right, and there's that number. They mentioned the 150 people number, Dunbar's number, essentially. You might have thousands of Facebook friends, but you can't really know more than about 150 people intimately.
Precisely. And without those close-knit, real groups, the result is often loneliness, alienation, even when we're technically connected to everyone online.
Yeah.
And while we have these bigger imagined communities like a nation or a political party or a favorite sports team, the sources argue they just can't provide the same kind of intimate warmth as, say, your actual friends, your siblings.
They're not a substitute.
Not really. Which leads to this paradox. Feeling lonely on the most connected planet in history.
It really makes you stop and think, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Do you feel that yourself? That gap between being hyper-connected online and maybe feeling, quite disconnected offline sometimes? And that brings us neatly to another major argument in these texts, this fundamental difference between online and offline life, and the idea that spending time online might actually, subtract from our offline world.
Yeah, they use a really simple but effective example. They call it the soup example.
Ah, yes, the soup example.
Your online friends, they can absolutely send supportive messages if you're sick. They can chat, send emojis, whatever, but they can't physically bring you a bowl of soup or make you tea.
Right, that needs someone physically there.
Yeah.
In your community.
Exactly. that needs physical presence, real-world interaction. And the sources argue, this goes deeper, that maybe technology is kind of distancing us from our own bodies, our senses. Well, think about, like, not really tasting your food because you're scrolling through your phone, or not noticing the sounds and smells around you because you're plugged into a device.
That image they paint of people at breakfast, both staring at their phones instead of each other, it's pretty stark.
Yeah, compare that to, say, ancient hunter-gatherers, who the sources say needed incredible awareness of their physical surroundings just to survive. The slightest sound, the subtle taste difference.
Whereas now, we can be incredibly inattentive to our immediate reality.
Right, and the sources make this interesting point. Tech companies often talk about giving you tools to share your experience. But maybe what we actually need are tools to connect with our own experience first.
Okay. So less focus on broadcasting, more on actually feeling.
Sort of, that impulse to instantly post something. Check for likes. Are you really in the moment? Or just framing it for others? The sources suggest our feelings can even get shaped by those online reactions, rather than our direct experience.
That's a powerful thought.
And the material links this potential alienation directly to losing touch with our own bodies. It even suggests this disconnect might be more fundamental than the decline of religion or national identity. Because if you don't feel at home in your own skin, how can you feel at home anywhere else?
Which logically leads to a major critique in the sources, Facebook's business model itself.
Exactly. It's built on capturing attention, right?
Yeah.
Their eyeballs on the screen, and selling that attention to advertisers.
So it inherently wants more of your time online.
Precisely. Which, according to the argument we've been tracing, directly competes with time spent offline, with family, friends, nature, your own body.
So the sources basically ask, can a company like Facebook genuinely adopt a model that encourages people to use it less, to go online maybe only when truly needed, and spend more time focused on their physical world, their senses?
Yeah, it's a huge question. And they followed up with, what would the shareholders say to that kind of shift? It seems like a fundamental conflict.
They do mention an alternative idea, don't they? Something about time well spent.
Right, yeah. That phrase promoted by Tristan Harris, an ex-Googler apparently. The idea of measuring the quality of time online, not just the quantity, but changing the whole business model around that.
Yeah.
That's the challenge.
Okay, shifting gears a bit. The sources also look at Zuckerberg's idea about bridging social divides, getting people to see each other as whole people through shared interests, not just political arguments.
It sounds nice, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Connect over hobbies, not headlines.
It does. But again, the sources offer a pretty strong counter-argument.
They do. They basically say, knowing someone as a whole person, that takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
And usually it requires real physical interaction. It comes back to that 150-person limit again. You just don't have the bandwidth for deep, holistic relationships with thousands.
Because it's limited.
And they argue it's kind of a zero-sum game. The time and energy you pour into getting to know online friends from, say, another country, that's likely time and energy you aren't spending getting to know your next-door neighbor.
Right. There's an opportunity cost to where you invest your social energy.
Exactly. Which leads the sources to propose this crucial test for Facebook.
Okay, what's the test?
Would the company genuinely support, or would it suppress, a tool developed internally that actually caused people to spend less time scrolling and buying stuff online and more time doing meaningful things offline with friends?
A test of priorities, basically. Social good versus the bottom line.
That's how the material frames it. And this whole online versus offline thing, it ripples out into other areas too, according to the sources, like taxation.
Taxation, how does that connect?
Well, the sources bring up the accusations that some tech giants, Facebook, Amazon, Google, Apple, are named, engage in, let's call it, aggressive tax avoidance, using complex structures, exploiting the fact that online activity is hard to pin down geographically.
Okay.
And the argument made in the text is kind of provocative. It says, if you think humans are primarily online beings, maybe avoiding taxes seems logical, whereas the physical infrastructure being used.
But if you remember, humans have bodies.
Exactly. If you remember, we need roads, hospitals, schools, sewage systems, all very offline services. Then refusing to contribute financially to those most important community services, as the source puts it, becomes much harder to justify.
That's a really interesting connection they draw.
It is. And they also touch on whether corporations can even be revolutionary forces.
Meaning?
Historically, the sources argue, big social or political revolutions aren't led by corporations. Why? because revolutions demand sacrifices, potentially huge ones, that employees and shareholders usually aren't willing to make, unlike, say, members of a church, a political party, or an army in certain contexts.
They use the Arab Spring as an example here, right?
They do, pointing out that while online tools were crucial for organizing initially, once things moved into the offline world, other groups, religious movements, military factions, often took control.
So the online energy didn't fully translate offline in the way activists might have hoped.
Right. The conclusion drawn is that bridging that online-offline gap is absolutely critical for any large-scale social movement. And the critique level at tech companies is that they often view humans too narrowly, like audiovisual animals.
Audiovisual animals.
Yeah, eyes, ears, fingers, a screen, and a credit card. Kind of missing the whole picture of a person with a body, physical needs, and complex offline lives.
Okay, so that's the critique. But then the sources pivot to a potential future threat, right? What happens when tech companies do start focusing more on the physical?
Precisely. The worry expressed is that recognizing the limits of purely online influence might just push these companies to extend their reach into our physical world even more directly.
Examples being,
Things like Google Glass, which overlay digital info onto your vision, or games like Pokemon Go, blending the digital and physical environments into augmented reality.
trying to merge the two worlds.
Exactly, but the sources suggest it could go much deeper than that. They talk about biometric sensors, even direct brain-computer interfaces.
Whoa. Okay, that's getting serious.
Yeah, technologies that don't just augment reality, but actually start to erode the boundary between the machine and the human body. Literally, as the source puts it, getting under our skin.
And the fear is,
The concern, voiced quite strongly in the material, is once tech giants understand and can interact with our bodies directly, our biometrics, maybe even neural signals, they might be able to manipulate our entire physical selves, our feelings, our health.
just like they currently manipulate our clicks and purchases.
That's the potential future outlined. The sources end that section with a rather chilling thought. We might actually end up missing the good old days when online was separated from offline.
Wow. Okay, so we've really covered a lot of ground today unpacking the material you shared. We've dug into that core tension between our online networks and our deep-seated human need for real offline community.
Yeah, we looked at Facebook's big ambitions, the immediate challenges they ran into, and this fundamental difference the sources stress between digital connection and actual physical presence.
We pulled out those key ideas.
Yeah.
The biological need for small groups, how online time can potentially displace offline connection, and the pretty significant implications for everything from business models and privacy to, well, the future of what it means to be human in a physical body.
Exactly. We really hope this deep dive into the material you provided has helped clarify some of these complex and honestly quite challenging issues.
And maybe it leaves us all with a final thought to chew on, drawn from themes in the source material. With this push to merge online and offline, machines and bodies, where do you draw the line? Where should the boundary be between your digital self and your physical self? Or looking ahead, is there even going to be a line anymore?